you see with a lot of these guys that were even more hyper focused on, excluding all the carbohydrates, especially the carnivore guys. At one point, they got glucose intolerance, and they
Yeah.
couldn't. Right? They were even intolerant to the glucose they produced in their liver, so they had to reintroduce a little bit of fruit or raw honey or
Yeah.
whatever. It has to be animal product. So I think like the exclusion of one or multiple food sources, I think is a little bit extreme, and you see that the body starts to reject it after a year or two.
As you and I both know, nobody ever got big or strong not eating, and that,
No.
which is what troubled me so much about keto diets and intermittent fasting. It's like, how does that have anything to do with strength and performance, and anaerobic performance? That's my challenge with those. Now, for dieters, for somebody who's just, the average population is trying to lose weight, hey, if that helps you adhere, if that keeps you satiated, if it's the diet that seems the least restrictive to you that you can comply with, then, knock yourselves out. I would posit that there's a whole host of reasons why it's not optimal, because you and I both discussed earlier that we envision our clients to have an athlete inside, and we like to see them perform. I don't mean to get too far off track, but you and I both watched for years on social media lots of people dive into the keto and intermittent fasting camps, only to reemerge some years later when hypertrophy and strength became a priority. And we've seen that now.
Yeah,
I mean, in the last year or two, primarily, you and I both have seen an extraordinary amount of focus on resistance training for even the average individual, for longevity, for not just lifespan, but health span. And the names are many, and they're very popular. Dr. Peter Attia being one on the forefront of that in terms of longevity. Remember, he was the keto king. He pissed on keto sticks for 3 years. He was the intermittent fasting king.
Most of these guys were very fanatical, right? And I still follow a ketogenic diet to this day, but I introduce a little bit of carbohydrates around the workout, purely for performance, right? Not because otherwise performance is minimalized, and I still like to get a fucking solid workout in. But I mostly do ketogenic diet for the nootropic and then the cognitive benefits. So I don't have these blood sugar fluctuations throughout the day until I go do my workout, and then I can have a little bit of carbs and reglycogenate the muscle. But you see with a lot of these guys that were even more hyper focused on excluding all the carbohydrates, especially the carnivore guys. At one point, they got glucose intolerance, and they couldn't. Right? They were even intolerant to the glucose they produced in their liver, so they had to reintroduce a little bit of fruit or raw honey or whatever. It has to be animal product. So I think like the exclusion of one or multiple food sources, I think is a little bit extreme. And you see that the body starts to reject it after a year or two.
As you said, it impairs performance for the specific intent. Mike Mutzel, I was on his podcast years ago. A lot of respect for him. MS, I think, in biochemistry. Smart guy, was keto for years and fasted for extended periods of time. Now, like you, he eats carbs around the workout window and gets sufficient sodium. Obviously, that's the second problem potentially with keto diets is the electrolyte depletion.
Yeah, it's horrendous, especially if you train in hotter climates. So I've always supplemented with sodium royally to up to maybe 6 grams per day. That's sodium, not sodium chloride. That's actual sodium. But I live in Thailand, right? Yeah, and it's a ton. It's a ton of sodium, but it really helps with performance. And of course, if your sodium intake is that high, then your magnesium and potassium and calcium intake also needs a little bit higher to have that optimal balance between the different electrolytes. But again, that if you tell people that, like, you eat 6 grams of sodium, are you sure? How's your blood pressure?
And that's not bad, because the average, if you look at the average worldwide, it's between about 3 and 5. I think if they wanted to put a single number on it, it would be 3.4 to 3.6, right in there. That's the average worldwide. Add a 1 hour of training, that's 2 milligrams or 2 grams of sodium. So now you're in your 5.5 to 7.
Right.
Based just on the fact that you're an active individual. And larger individuals need more. And I'll say one more thing. I'll say that the salt concentration matters more in terms of any potential deleterious effects on blood pressure or endothelial lining damage. If you're going to have 1,000 milligrams of salt in 9 ounces of water, it's going to be a very different response to your body than 1,000 milligrams of salt in a liter of water.
Right.
And so that the titration matters, the salt concentration matters. I was going to go on and just say there's a couple more folks. Paul Saladino, of course, was one who I was on his podcast years ago, was a devout keto carnivore, intermittent fasting guy. And the conversation that Damon and I had with him, and I think ultimately, subsequently, when performance became his priority, when getting stronger and better hypertrophy, he started incorporating fruits, raw honey, and calcium from dairy. That's another big one. I asked him years ago. It's been, I could pull up a DM to Paul probably 4+ years ago. And I said, Paul, how are you getting your calcium? And he mentioned you can get it from bone marrow. And I'm like, no. How are you getting 1,000 milligrams? Because I don't suspect that anybody's eating 1,000 milligrams of bone marrow a day. Supplementation.
No, it's tough. And liver has a decent amount of calcium, but how much liver can you eat before you get into this, vitamin A, retinal state where it's just too much for your liver to handle.
Yeah. And of course, my proposal is going to be Greek yogurt. There's so many incredible benefits to that. It's tolerated better than regular milk in terms of its lactose content. It's got obviously we're seeing all the research now on fermented foods. The probiotic stuff has been there hasn't been a lot of really good definitive data that could, it kind of depends on which probiotic and under what circumstance. Right. So I mean, I hate to claim that has some magical benefit. I said that in one of my rants years ago when I talked about probiotics, but the fermented foods we see, and that was the Sonnenberg trials at Stanford when they did the fiber feeding studies and found that raising fiber, it improved gut microbiome for a third, had no difference for a third, and actually was harmful for a third.
Which one are we going to choose to go with?
Yeah, but the fermented foods, the yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, those improved gut microbiome diversity and quantity across the board for everyone. So as long as it's good, well tolerated, that would include like a hard cheese, like a cheddar. So I'm a big fan of trying to throw yogurt into those diets.
Every day, man, post workout. I just had a bowl today. Yeah, fruit yogurt, and it sits very well in the stomach when you follow a ketogenic diet. And I have a decent amount of vegetables with each serving of protein just to make sure that everything passes through, because you can't just eat protein without any fiber. Because otherwise, you have a little bit of, backed up, or it doesn't digest well. You need to slow it down. Otherwise, you have too much gluconeogenesis from the protein that you eat. So it's, there's so many things you can play with when it comes to nutrition. And ultimately, I think if you find like something that really, really works, but not exclude anything, it's very sustainable. But of course, for performance, I would say, the best performance I ever had was when I was taking large amounts of carbohydrates, similarly to the vertical diet. That's
certainly around workouts, not only for its benefits during training, but also its anti-catabolic benefits immediately post window. And you have the stimulus of the muscle so that those carbohydrates post workout aren't going to spike your blood sugars as high, although that's still not a huge concern for normal individuals, because that's expected.
That's actually what you want, to have a little bit of this, glucose and a micronutrient uptake from an insulin response. And of course, if you limit it to, simple carbohydrates like rice and easy to digest the other sources, then that's exactly what you need, because this helps with the recovery process.